It was impossible not to feel the emotion that took over the gymnasium at that moment. Steph Curry was standing there, holding the hand of a man who seemed to have stepped out of a dream, or from a nightmare that lasted 13 years. Tears streamed down both their faces, and the silence weighed like 1,000 unspoken words. But to understand how we arrived at this heartbreaking moment, we need to go back in time. Long before the victories, long before the fame, long before Steph Curry became an NBA legend. Oakland, California, year 2010. The smell of breakfast still hung in the air when young Steph, then only 22 years old, walked through the familiar streets of his neighborhood. At that time, Oakland was a city that breathed basketball. You could sense that every corner echoed with the rhythmic sound of balls bouncing on asphalt. Every court carried dreams and stories of boys who wanted to make it to the NBA. It was a common Tuesday morning when Steph passed by the corner of 14th Street and Broadway. The cutting December cold carried the scent of determination that only those who live in Oakland know. But then something happened that no one expected. Sitting on the worn wooden bench was a man who would change his life forever. Robert Kim was 45 years old, graying hair disheveled by the wind, and wore a worn military coat that told stories without needing words. He was an Iraq war veteran, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. Have you ever wondered how some people enter our lives at the exact moment we need them? That day, Steph was going through one of the most difficult moments of his career. He had just been dismissed from the college team, and doubts hammered in his mind like persistent rain. Do I have enough talent? Will I be able to achieve my dream? Robert looked up when Steph passed by, and something magical happened. An instant connection, as if two souls recognized each other. "Hey, kid," said Robert with a hoarse but gentle voice. "You play basketball, don't you?" Steph stopped. Something in that man's voice made him feel as if he were talking to a dear uncle he hadn't seen in years. "How do you know?" asked Steph, genuinely curious. Robert smiled, a smile that warmed more than any blanket. "By the way you walk, boy. Basketball players have a different gait. Confident, but hungry to prove themselves." And there began a friendship that would flourish like a rare plant in unlikely soil. Naturally, this leads us to understand that life's deepest connections happen in the most unexpected moments. During the following months, Robert became much more than just an acquaintance from the streets. He was like a lighthouse in the storm of Steph's uncertainty. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Steph would pass by the corner of 14th Street, and there was Robert, always with a word of encouragement, always with a different perspective on life. "You know what your problem is, Steph?" Robert said one afternoon, while the aroma of coffee from a nearby diner mixed with the noise of traffic. "You're trying to be perfect. But basketball, like life, isn't about perfection. It's about resistance. How many times in life do we find someone who can see our soul better than we see ourselves?" Robert shared stories from the war, not the traumatic parts, but the lessons about teamwork, about never giving up when things get tough. And Steph absorbed every word like a sponge. The warmth of Robert's wisdom heated his heart in a way he couldn't even explain. The conversations extended for months. Robert followed from a distance each small victory of Steph's, each progress on the team. When Steph finally got a spot on the Golden State Warriors, Robert was the first person he looked for to share the joy. "I knew it, kid," said Robert with that smile that had become so familiar. "I always knew you would make it there." The atmosphere was charged with emotion when Steph held Robert's hand that day. It was as if the universe had conspired to place that man in his life at exactly the right moment. But then, suddenly, everything changed. It was March of 2011. Steph, now already established in the NBA, returned to the corner of 14th Street and Broadway on a Tuesday, as he always did. The breakfast from the surrounding area perfumed the air in the same way. The traffic made the same noise, but something was different. The bench was empty. The following Thursday, Steph returned. Empty again. A week passed, 2 weeks, an entire month. Robert Kim had disappeared. Steph asked local merchants, other homeless people, even the police. Nobody knew where Robert had gone. It was as if he had simply evaporated. What is most striking is how someone's absence can scream louder than their presence. The silence of that empty bench echoed in Steph's ears like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. In the days that followed, Steph felt an emptiness in his chest that he couldn't explain. Robert wasn't just a friend. He had become a father figure, a mentor, someone who believed in him when he didn't even believe in himself. How is it possible that someone so important simply disappears without leaving traces? Steph tried everything. He searched in shelters, hospitals, veterans organizations. He asked, investigated, persisted, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack the size of all of California. And so began a search that would last 13 long years. It was 2024. 13 years had passed since Robert Kim's disappearance. Steph was now a consolidated NBA legend, family man, global basketball icon. His hands that once trembled with nervousness, holding a ball for the first time, were now the most respected on courts around the world. But there was something that success couldn't cure: the void left by Robert. It was impossible not to feel that every victory, every trophy, every moment of glory was incomplete. Certain people leave marks on our soul that time cannot erase. Every night after games, when silence weighed over the Curry family house, Steph would catch himself looking out the window and wondering, "Where are you, Robert? Do you know that I never stopped looking?" The search had become more than a personal mission. It was a sacred obsession. Steph had created a small team dedicated exclusively to finding Robert Kim. They scoured hospital records, shelters, veterans organizations, even morgues. Every clue was followed with the precision of a detective and the hope of a child waiting for a Christmas present. The heat of determination warmed every effort, but the cold of uncertainty froze every negative result. It was on a rainy Tuesday in January that everything began to change. The smell of rain on the San Francisco asphalt brought memories of Oakland, of those mornings when Robert was still there, always on the same bench, always with the same welcoming smile. Steph was in his office when the phone rang. On the other end of the line, a female voice, professional but loaded with emotion. "Mr. Curry, my name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm a social worker here in Los Angeles. I think I have information about the person you've been looking for so many years." The world stopped. Literally stopped. Steph felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. Jennifer's words echoed in his mind like bells from a distant church. After 13 years of silence, finally, a voice. "Robert Kim," said Jennifer, and the name sounded like music to Steph's ears. "A war veteran, about 58 years old now, who used to live on the streets of Oakland?" Yes, that's him," Steph managed to whisper, his voice choked with emotion. Do you know where he is?" What Jennifer said next made Steph's heart race like it had never raced, even in the most tense moments of the NBA. Mr. Curry, I've been working with vulnerable veterans for over 15 years, and a few months ago, I began following a very special case at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center here in Los Angeles. The tension in the air was palpable. Steph could hear his own heart beating, each pulse echoing like drums in his ears. He arrived at the hospital about 6 months ago, continued Jennifer, her voice carrying a mixture of hope and sadness that Steph couldn't decipher. He was in a very delicate condition. How is it possible that a single sentence can contain so many contradictory emotions? Steph closed his eyes. Memories of Robert flooded his mind like an avalanche of feelings. The smell of breakfast in Oakland, the sound of his hoarse but caring voice, the warmth of that paternal embrace he had never felt again. "Jennifer," Steph said, trying to control his breathing, Can I speak with him?" The silence on the other end of the line lasted only a few seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. "Mr. Curry, before anything else, I need you to understand something. Robert is alive, but his condition is complex. He has been facing battles that go far beyond what any person should face alone." "What kind of battles?" Steph asked, although part of him already knew the answer would break his heart. "Severe post-traumatic stress disorder, Mr. Curry. After leaving Oakland, Robert spent years wandering the country, fighting demons that war planted in his mind. There are periods when he doesn't even recognize himself." Reality fell on Steph like a weight he had never felt. During all these years searching for Robert, he had imagined a happy reunion, tears of joy, warm embraces. He had never considered that Robert might be fighting a silent war inside his own mind. Have you ever felt like the ground had disappeared from under your feet? "But there's something else, Mr. Curry," Jennifer continued, and Steph noticed she was trying to control her own emotion. "Something that will touch your heart in a way you never imagined." "What is it?" Steph managed to ask, although his voice was barely a whisper. "Robert talks about you constantly. In moments of lucidity, when the fog of confusion dissipates, he tells everyone who wants to listen about a young basketball player he met in Oakland. He says that young man was special, that he would go far, that he had a heart the size of the world." The tears that Steph had held back for so long finally began to flow. The warmth of that revelation heated his chest in a way he hadn't felt in 13 years. Does he remember me?" "More than that, Mr. Curry. He's proud of you. Every time he sees news about you on TV, in the hospital, he points to the screen and tells anyone who's around, 'That one there is my boy. I always knew he would be special.'" Steph could no longer control the tears. 13 years of longing, 13 years of guilt for not having found Robert earlier, 13 years of unanswered questions. Everything came to the surface at that moment. "Jennifer, I need to see him. Today. Can I go there?" The trip to Los Angeles was the longest of Steph's life. Each mile seemed like an eternity. Each red light in traffic seemed to last hours. But there was something different in the air, a mixture of anxiety and hope that made his heart pulse at a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. It was as if, after 13 years lost in a dark forest, he had finally found a trail that would lead him back home. No one could imagine that moment would be the turning point. The Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Los Angeles was an imposing building that carried in its walls thousands of stories of men and women who served the country. Steph parked the car with trembling hands. The tension was so thick he could practically touch it. Jennifer was waiting for him in the reception. She was a woman of about 40 years old, brown hair tied in a bun, and eyes that demonstrated the compassion of someone who dedicates their life to caring for others. "Mr. Curry," she said, extending her hand, "thank you for coming. Before we go in, I need you to know, Robert is going through one of his most difficult days. There are moments when he's present, lucid, but there are also periods when he gets lost." Steph nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. The hospital smell, a mixture of disinfectant and hope, flooded his nostrils as they walked through the corridors. "He's in room 304, Jennifer said, stopping in front of a door. "Steph, I need you to be prepared. The Robert you're going to meet isn't the same man you knew 15 years ago. What would you do if you were about to reunite with someone who changed your life, but knew that person might not recognize you?" Steph took a deep breath and opened the door. The room was simple, bathed in soft light that came from the window. And there, sitting in a rocking chair looking outside, was him. Robert Kim. Time had been cruel to him. His hair, formerly graying, was now completely white. His face, which once radiated strength and wisdom, now carried the deep marks of invisible battles. He was thinner, more fragile, but there was something in his eyes, a familiar spark. "Robert," Steph whispered. Robert turned slowly. His eyes met Steph's, and for a moment, time stopped. It was possible to see the confusion in that gaze, as if he were trying to connect scattered memories. Do I know you?" Robert asked, his voice still hoarse, but now loaded with fragility. Steph's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. But then he remembered the words that Robert himself had told him so many years ago. Basketball, like life, isn't about perfection. It's about resistance. Steph approached slowly, as if he were approaching a wounded animal that needed care. "My name is Steph," he said softly. "Steph Curry. We met a long time ago in Oakland. You used to sit on a bench at the corner of 14th Street and Broadway." For a few seconds, Robert's face remained neutral. But then, something happened. A different brightness appeared in his eyes, as if a light that had been extinguished for so long was being rekindled. "Steph?" Robert whispered, and his voice carried a mixture of disbelief and recognition. My basketball boy?" Tears streamed down Steph's face like a waterfall of emotions repressed for 13 years. "Yes, Robert. It's me, your basketball boy." And then something happened that neither Jennifer, nor Steph, nor anyone expected. Robert got up from the chair with a strength that seemed impossible for someone in his condition, and opened his arms. "My boy," he said, his voice choked. "You grew up. You became exactly what I knew you would become." The embrace that followed was more than a reunion. It was the healing of a wound that had bled for 13 years. It was the answer to all silent prayers. It was proof that some human connections are so deep that not even time, nor distance, nor even mental confusion can destroy them. "I looked for you," Steph said between sobs. "I looked for you every day." "I know, son," Robert replied, holding Steph's face with his trembling hands. "Somehow, I always knew you would find me." Jennifer, who was watching the scene from the other side of the room, couldn't contain her own tears. In 15 years of working with veterans, she had never witnessed something so powerful. "Robert," Steph said, still holding you, the hands of the man who had been like a father to him. "I want to take care of you. I want you to come live with me, with my family. You'll never be alone again." Robert smiled, that same warm smile that Steph remembered from Oakland. You would do that for an old man like me? Robert, Steph said, his voice firm and loaded with conviction, you changed my life when I needed it most. You believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. Now, it's my turn to take care of you. What is most striking is how true love doesn't count time, doesn't measure distance, doesn't calculate costs. It simply exists, pure and unconditional. In the weeks that followed, Steph organized everything so that Robert would receive the best possible treatment. He hired the best PTSD specialists, adapted an entire wing of his house to accommodate Robert comfortably, and, most importantly, gave him something he hadn't had in 13 years, a family. The transformation was gradual, but notable. With love, adequate medical care, and, most importantly, with renewed purpose, Robert began to have more lucid days. He started following Steph's games, not from the TV in a lonely hospital, but from the front row, wearing a personalized shirt that read, Curry's Dad. The story of the reunion spread like fire, not just because of Steph's fame, but because it touched a universal human need. The need for belonging, for not being forgotten, for knowing that we matter to someone. Robert became a beloved figure in the basketball community. On good days, he gave talks in schools, telling young athletes about the importance of persistence, about how a casual encounter can change two lives forever. Do you know what the secret is? Robert would tell the children, his voice gaining strength with each word. The secret isn't being perfect. It's being present. It's being there when someone needs you. It's not giving up on the people we love. And Steph discovered that saving Robert had, in fact, saved a part of himself that he didn't even know was lost. The guilt he had carried for 13 years transformed into gratitude. The pain transformed into purpose. Together, they created the Kim Curry Foundation for Vulnerable Veterans. The organization has already helped hundreds of veterans find not just a place to sleep, but a place to belong. Today, when Steph makes an impossible shot on NBA courts, he looks to the front row and sees Robert, applauding with the pride of a father. And when Robert has a difficult day, when the fog of confusion returns to hover over his mind, Steph is there, holding his hand, reminding him of who he is, of what he means. How incredible that a friendship that began on a cold Oakland corner has become a story that inspires millions of people around the world. The journey teaches us that some people enter our lives for a reason. They shape us, transform us, make us better than we were before. And when we have the chance to return that gift, we discover that caring for those who cared for us is one of the deepest experiences a human being can have. Steph Curry searched for Robert Kim for 13 years, and when he finally found him, he discovered that the man who had saved his career still needed to be saved. But the most beautiful truth of this entire story is that, in the end, they saved each other. And that is a mark that will remain forever.